Awesome. Thanks, Sumana. Hi, everyone in person. Hi to those panelists in Calgary. Hi to those of us who are virtually coming into you. I'm really, really excited about this panel. I personally am aware of my own neurodivergency, and so I feel really excited and honored to share this space with some experts in the field who have some really incredible insights from their own experience and professional life and research to share with us. So we're going to kick it off by having each panel member introduce themselves with kind of what is hopefully a fun and interesting, for those of us who are a little ADHD, fun and interesting way to introduce yourself. So if we can start with Dr. Ranjani, tell us your name, where you live, work, and play, the company and position you have, if you're more interested in research or practice, and what excites you about being on today's panel. So give us a little bit of intro.
Hey, thank you so much. It's so great to be here with everyone. And I was saying to Sumana backstage that it's great to be in a room where your energy can go up by 2 points simply by just being. So that's pretty cool. So my name is Ranjani Somayaji. I'm an adult infectious disease physician and scientist. So I get to do lots of cool things. I get to play with data. I think what excites me to be here today in terms of whether it's research or practice, it's definitely both. I'm relatively new to the DI space, but I think we all bring a lived experience with us. And so it's really about converting that to a more conscious way of thinking about DEI and belonging. And so that's what I'm excited to do here today. And I think with any research, it's about taking it to the next stage of how do we implement, how do we have knowledge translation. And so that's what I'm excited to do here with everyone today.
Awesome. Thank you so much. We will go to Taya.
Hello, everyone. My name is Tea Romero. I am located in Kansas City, Missouri in the US. I'm right in the center, so I don't have any beaches or oceans. That's always a huge deal for me to go to the beach. I am neurodivergent myself. I work at a company called Clario in clinical research. I very much enjoy research. That would be my emphasis, but the practicalities of how to implement these things in our day-to-day work life are so important that we really need to also look at how we fit into that puzzle, and not necessarily just everyone accommodating us, but also knowing yourself and being able to accommodate to new situations is important. But I think that is all I'm going to add for my intro. Thanks.
That's perfect. That's a perfect intro. Trent, we'll jump to you and then we'll finish out with those of us who are in person.
Fantastic. Hi, my name is Trent Norman. I am in Colorado, which is in the United States, so kind of a neighbor to Kansas. Depending on how far up on the map you are, it gets closer. That's where I live, work, and play. I'm with a company called Affinity Arts Consulting. My partner, Rebecca Brown Edelman, is also there. Hi, Rebecca. We use theater as a way of telling stories for folks. So taking things and then making them into something that is interactive. Am I more interested in research or practice? I'm not a very good researcher, but I think research is a really important thing. But it's really for us about taking the research and telling the story so that people can connect to it in a way. And our work is interactive, so there is a component of skill building, of trying to do some problem solving, of trying to, trying to understand how things can work in the real life. I know some folks have talked about being neurodivergent. I think that's a requirement for theater. But there's certainly some things around my life and living that I have experienced. I'm a survivor of a brain injury and have been diagnosed with some learning disabilities. So this topic is really important to me. And I'm happy to be a part of the conversation as well today. So that is enough for me, I think, for now.
Awesome. No, I'm giving you guys plenty of time for the intros because I think it's fascinating. It's going to lay the foundation for some really interesting interactive discussion among many of you. So thank you, Trent, for sharing that. Welcome to the crew. And then to those who are there in Calgary, if we can get an intro from Krista, that would be great.
Hi, I'm super excited to be here. My name is Krista. I'm the founder of a Community Now magazine. For research, I'll leave that to Ty, and I will just tell all the stories. So my whole thing is to be able to be a storyteller and to take everybody's knowledge and all their expertise and share it with everyone else so that we can connect the dots. Wellness and mental health is super important everywhere in our lives. So I'm super excited to be a part of this and to talk about neurodiversity and data and how data helps the community understand wellness, which is also really important. And that's me.
Very good. Thanks so much. And last but not least, Farah, introduce yourself to us.
Hi, everyone. My name is Farah Jamil, and I'm based in Alberta, Canada. Alberta is just above Montana, just in case you need that geography. Because I always have to tell people, where is that? Where's Alberta? But now we all know where Alberta is, right, folks? Yes, yes, we all know where we're at. I am a health executive where I've developed health policies to improve patient care. So I've been in the health leadership role for over 15 years. I'm an executive coach and I'm an ADHD coach. And one of my passions, not only for myself, but for others, is to help people be less passive and more proactive in their career and leadership goals. And that's from a DEI and belonging perspective. That's from a neurodiversity perspective. So I'm really excited to be here and be part of the conversation. Thank you.
Fantastic. I'm happy to have you here. And Ty, we did an introduction with you. You've done a presentation, but just real quick, is there anything you want to add about the geography lesson that we're all getting? I love this because I'm also from the Rocky Mountain West and there's so many cool connections here, but tell us a little bit more about why you're excited to be here with the panelists today.
So I guess going back to the geography piece, I'm from Alberta originally, but I actually did my PhD in Utah. So where I used to live, work, and play was the desert, and I really do miss that. As beautiful as the prairies are and the mountains here are, I do miss that particular landscape. And as far as why I'm really excited to be a part of this panel, I think neurodiversity is something that as a human society, we've always had with us and we've always celebrated in a lot of ways. But it's only really been until recently that we started to think about it within this DE&I framework and how it's something that we can be a little bit more explicit about. So I'm really excited for being able to take neurodiversity and have some data behind it and really make it, again, going back to what Trent was saying, the implementation side. How can we take the research that some of us are doing and implement it within organizations so that everyone gets to benefit no matter who they are?
Fantastic. And just to tie this geography lesson up with a bow, I also am a desert dweller from Western Colorado and love the desert. Highly recommend going to Western Colorado or Utah for your next trip. So here's how I want to run the panel today. I am going to kind of focus on an individual person with kind of a specific question, but if someone on the panel is like dying to engage in that conversation, please feel free to just unmic or pipe up and we can have a really interesting discussion. But I want to start with Dr. Ranjani. Can you help us by laying the foundation, from your perspective in healthcare research, why neurodiversity and wellness in the workplace is such an important conversation to be having?
Certainly. Thank you. And I guess before I start, some of you might be questioning, what is an infectious disease doctor doing on this panel? And so I just want to assure everyone that I will not be monitoring your hand washing or mask use. So we all wear different hats. And so today I'm going to be focusing on my researcher hat. I work as an epidemiologist to understand rates, risk factors, and outcomes of infections and other conditions. And as part of that work, I really focus on understanding and rethinking definitions so that we think about what we're measuring and are we measuring what we actually need to or want to measure, and is that valid for the people that we're trying to measure it for? And so bringing that back to diversity, although the diversity definitions are expanding, I think diversity, certainly on committees that I've been, traditionally associates with factors like age, gender, and race or ethnicity. And so when we actually step back and reflect on that, you can imagine that it kind of looks like that's a pretty narrow definition. If we actually consider all the factors that shape who we are, it's probably a pretty narrow definition. So why such a narrow definition? And I think it comes down to the fact that those are pretty visible and perceivable compared to other factors. So I can look at someone and guess their age group, guess their gender and their ethnicity. I might be totally wrong in all of those things, but I can get some degree of perception on that. Whereas other factors such as socioeconomic status, access or education status and neurodiversity are much less visible, much less perceivable unless you actually get to know an individual. So with that said, we also make the assumption when we say, hey, diversity is about age, gender, race, and or ethnicity, we actually place more importance on those immediately. We make that assumption. And so I think, again, we need to rethink that. So what actually is important to a person, again, requires understanding of that person. I grew up in a little village in India. It was a kilometer squared in area. I got to move to Canada at the age of 8, went to school here, have done all my education here, and have lived and played here since. So you could imagine that someone of my age box, of my gender, of my ethnicity from that village probably has had a very different life than me and might consider or might place value on different factors that define them compared to myself. And that's probably the same for many others. So again, I think it's important to rethink how we think about diversity and expand our definition so that we can include factors and not just assume how important one factor is to one person.
That's fantastic. I think that absolutely bridges for so many people kind of even the reason that we're having the panel discussion with this workplace wellness DEI component. So I really appreciate that. Taya, coming to you, you've spoken to the Workplace Wellness Collective at a previous summit. You work in ERGs and clinical research, which are so important. Can you share some of your top insights into what it means to be neurodivergent in the workplace, what accommodations and cultural adjustments can do to really impact the wellness of those staff members?
Sure. So first, we're all technically neurodivergent, right? Because it just means a difference in thinking, a difference in processing, and we are all different. And each person with an autism diagnosis is completely different. It's not going to be a one size fits all. And I think that is very frustrating to leadership when they're first introduced to the topic of neurodiversity and how to assist people in the workplace, right? Because they see it as a mountain too big to even attempt to climb. But in reality, a lot of the things that we can do to make your life more easy, not only as a person with neurodiversity, but as a manager of a person that has neurodiversity. There are small things we can do to help open those conversations, to help understand where another person is coming from. Something that we did recently at my work is we did this exercise of the Myers-Briggs, but it went a little further than just the Myers-Briggs, and it showed how to interact with people that are in different personality types and what's important to those people in general. It was very generalized, but I think that kind of exercise interested me in terms of neurodiversity and what could we learn and pull from that in a workplace. Like if I am an introvert or you're an extrovert, we can still communicate and fill the gaps of what the other is lacking. And I think that is how we need to approach neurodiversity. There's so many things that you bring to the table that are positives, long-term planning, attention to details, these are things that we can really focus on and enhance at work, but there may be gaps too. Maybe the communication piece, maybe you need a manager to QC an email before it goes out. Those small asks are huge in making the workplace, desirable for both sides. So I would say, having the discussion is the first step, and it's not as scary as it seems, because a lot of things that we can do are things just personally you can take responsibility for, which costs you nothing, or some things that already come with systems like Microsoft 365 has an entire accessibility feature to it that has many different features that are very helpful for various people on the spectrum. So it's just getting people comfortable enough to talk and willing to talk.
Yeah, I think it's so interesting. It's kind of an insight, I guess, that I hadn't thought about, was some of this can be framed as an evolution of personality tests that have been going on in the corporate world for the past 20 years, right? Like this is the extension of that and the better data-driven side of that potentially. So thanks for sharing that. And thinking about tools, right? We have Ty here on the panel who's developed an app that literally does some of this, right? And so Ty, I wondered if there was anything you wanted to step in and share any thoughts around this kind of part of the conversation.
Yeah, so I think personality testing does a really good job of capturing some of the broad strokes of neurodiversity. Because we're probably thinking about it with respect, do you have ADHD? Do you have autism? But it can be more subtle than that. The way that you emotionally respond to situations. As a scientist, we call that neuroticism. Sounds bad, is actually quite helpful. And that's something that can be captured through personality testing. As someone with some clinical psychology training, I will put a plug for the Ocean model, or the Big Five of personality testing. It's got a lot more data behind it than the Myers-Briggs. So no offense to anyone that uses Myers-Briggs, but there's a better one.
I think that's great. We want all the tools and resources laid out on the table for people to pick and choose from and find a best fit for them. Thanks, Ty. That's great. Trent, I want to pull you in. It sounds like the work that you do with the Affinity Arts Consulting Group really guides teams to learn and practice dialogue skills by creating and recreating space for them to slow down and focus and learn and engage using real-world scenarios and theatrical techniques. I'm wondering why, and maybe more importantly, how, given that you chose practitioner as your where you lean, how do you incorporate neurodiversity awareness in the work that you do with teams?
Thank you. That's a fantastic question, and it's there's a lot of complexity to it as we're all learning here. So one of the I'll start with an example. Colorado School of Mines asked us to do something for their students around stress, burnout, and some issues that might be coming up for students around mental health and mental wellness. Speaking is not my thing today, so I'm going to communicate here on out in hieroglyphs. So we created this performance that was about the student experience, and in it there was a student who was living with depression, anxiety, and trying to navigate their life with other students. We create these performances so that they're interactive, so that people get a chance to try and change the dynamic, or understand what's going on in a way that's deeper, by asking questions or processing around what they're seeing, what they're experiencing, and then we do some facilitation to get folks to talk about and with each other about what they've noticed, and does this relate to them. So that's kind of a big framework of how something that we can do. That's one example. The other thing that we're considering when we're doing our work is who's in the cast, how are they being portrayed, what's happening. So a scene might be about so we have one that deals with sexual assault, but who is being portrayed in there also gets down to who our performers are and what our actors are doing and how they're showing up. And we always try and talk about what are the impacts of all of the things that are happening on the people in the scenario, as well as the people in the audience. And if someone shows up, for instance, we've had performers who have identified some of their issues around their neurodiversity and have been willing to incorporate those types of things into the performance. So then it becomes a part of the character that we've created. And so the complexity, the nuance, the broader understanding of the people that we're working with in these scenarios gets to come through in that space. We get to learn that not only is this character dealing with what might be the surface issue in that first example, which was dealing with study group and being stressed out, but we also get to understand what the depths of their experiences are and how they're influencing the way that they're showing up around their own anxiety or their own depression, or their own survivor issues that they feel comfortable bringing forward to their character work. As facilitators, Rebecca and I we're trying to always broaden our understanding, particularly around the justice, equity, diversity, inclusion lens. We have been talking about neurodiversity, mental health issues for quite some time, and always learning more. So when those things arise, if we're talking about, as we talked about earlier, like if we're talking about race, it's impossible to separate just one piece of our identities out. So it's imperative for us. It's an important part of our practice for us to talk about how these things relate to one another. So if we're talking about something that deals with race, it's also like, what is this impact on the person, the whole person? Myself as someone who, as I said earlier, is living with my own challenges or issues or parts of my life around my own mental health and mental awareness. It's easier for me to bring those components in and talk about my experiences as a facilitator. One, to bring and raise awareness, and two, we believe that by seeing things and by having as actors and facilitators opportunities for people to get a touchstone, we start to build empathy. If there's an interaction that's going on, that some people can bring some skills, so you get to try out some skills around naming some things. Going back to that performance that I referenced earlier that we did for Colorado School of Mines, the whole point of that thing was to learn how to talk to each other about what's going on. How are you feeling? What's your emotional, what's your mental state? What are you living with? So we're finding opportunities for folks to build better skills around those things. Overall, it gives us an opportunity to expand the conversation so that it doesn't get so narrow into, okay, we are going to just talk about sexual assault right now. No, we are more than that. There are impacts that that influence the way that we show up. There are impacts the way that the audience members show up. So it's important for us to try and surface as many of those things as we can in a way that feels appropriate and give people an opportunity to start to think more. I guess I'll stop this ramble by saying that there's this rule that we live by. It's like the rule of 27 or 99 that people need to hear or practice or do something 27 to 99 times before it becomes truth or real. And we never know where people are in that space. So if somebody is trying something out for the first time, it's going to look one way, and it can look the same way and up until we get to that place where they start to integrate it. So providing opportunities for people to practice and try and fail in this situation where the stakes aren't as high, because we got actors who are trained to work with folks, because we got facilitators who are there to help people go along, eventually can lead to better skills, better understanding as people are moving out into the world, right? So our approach is that we're going to try as much as we can to try and get folks to think about, to do about, to try about any of the issues around the justice, equity, diversity, inclusion, which includes all of those elements that we talked about before, as well as our mental health and how things are going. So I feel like that was a little bit windy. If you have questions, I can try and answer them.
It was perfect, and it was really fun to hear and to think about how unique the company and the work that you do really is, and like where that might fit into somebody's DEI plans or workplace wellness plans. I think it's really fascinating, and what I keep hearing is this thread of, by talking about neurodiversity and DEI, we are getting into a deeper, more authentic, more whole self representation of those that we're interacting with and how we can improve systems. And I just I'm here for it. I applaud it. I love the work that you're doing, Trent. So thank you for sharing a lot of that with us.